So I think, and he's been up and down. He's still catching up there at the AAA level. I'm just not big on bringing him up if he's only going to play once or even twice a week. To me, he's spending too much time sitting on the bench. He can do that again another time. I mean, that's my thing. If you can bring him up and get him playing, okay. But if not, I just don't think it's a foregone conclusion, because as much as you guys want to see him and people are like, hey, I've heard about this guy, I want to see him play, at the same time, the Indians are chasing the playoffs, which means they're going to put the best lineup out there to win every day, and you can't factor in future development for the next 30 days if you're the Indians. You're factoring in, how do we win today's game? I don't know if that's the best environment to develop Lindor for the end of the month. That's all. Other than that, I'd be with it. If they were out of it, or if they fall out of it and you can play him every day, hey, a week from now we could be talking about something different. You lose 6 straight games here and all of a sudden you're double digits back, and we're talking about a whole different last month of the season. Knock on wood, that's not going to happen. But do you hear my point on that? That's where I'm thinking I would have second thoughts if I was the Indians, because I need him ready for next season. I need him to continue to improve. I don't know how much he does that not playing at the major league level.
Well, the one thing is, you got to remember the minor league season, it kind of comes to an end in early September. So after the first week of September, they're going to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. At that point, Columbus, he's up no matter what.
So you can bring him up, and I think that they can find, maybe if they could let him play 4 or 5 days a week, maybe 3 of them out in shortstop and maybe a couple at DH, because, like I said, you don't have great hitters up and down this lineup. You have guys, like the Dickerson's not hitting all that great. You got people who are in like the 7, 8 spots in the order. You're trying to get some kind of production out of him. You could flip-flop, Ramirez and Lindor and a couple other, and maybe say a V-list between short and DH, and you can get Lindor in the lineup, I think, 4 or 5 times. I don't think that he would be wasted on the bench. It'd be one thing if you had a lineup that was just knocking in 7 runs a game and, you kill, well, who can we sit? We can't sit anybody. Yeah, we can sit somebody and get Lindor in there. I think he can be done.
Well, the thing is they're trying to do exactly what you're talking with Ramirez. They're trying to figure out what they've got in him for this winter, for this upcoming spring, so that they know whether they should trade, whether he's a viable trade piece, whether he's a viable infielder, a starter, a utility guy. I mean, he's not far behind Lindor as far as ahead of him, I should say, in that curve where they're trying to get that grip on him. So now you got 2 guys in your spot. I'm just saying, I mean, obviously when the minor league season ends and everybody comes up, maybe he ends up sitting around, and maybe it's good for him. Maybe they do what some teams do. Maybe he does come up and just catch up to things, watch and practice every day and get in a game or 2 a week, or, because they're going to want to rotate Ramirez in there too. Like you just said, they're intrigued with what they've seen, but they want to see more of a sample of that too. And I just think that that's something to think about with that. But Jesus Aguilar, that's somebody that I think is very high possibility that he comes up. I want to see perhaps he can bring his, and that's an offensive. We're talking about guys that can jumpstart the power, and we've seen what Walters has done here with the spark and that bat. I think Aguilar's a September guy that can come up and put some wood on the ball, even if it's just in some pinch hitting appearances and occasional DH, and rotate him in that kind of that DH rotation for the rest of the season. I definitely think he can make an impact offensively during the month of September. You agree?
I do agree, and I think that, Lindor could possibly be that same type of guy. What you want is you want to get these guys up here, and considering how moribund this offense has been, see if somebody can catch fire and just start hitting like 350, 380 down the stretch, because you need somebody to give you a little bit of lightning in a bottle and get you those timely hits that are going to win your games down the stretch. So I think you have to. What I'm saying is, getting back to your previous point, I don't think the Indians can afford not to try Lindor offensively, because what if he turns out great? And what if he goes and hits 350 or 380? And it can't happen if we don't give him a try. That's my point there.
Okay, but now I'm going to counter that by saying we've now mentioned Lindor, we've mentioned Aguilar here, we've mentioned we talked about Ramirez, and I threw up Walters. Okay, you don't go into the biggest stretch of your season, the final 30 days, playing monkey bars with your lineup. You don't say, you know what, we're going to throw 6 new guys in here and see if the lineup gets better. You don't change it like that either. Now, you find a spot for a guy. You find opportunities to get a guy in here and a guy in there. But what you're talking about, well, the offense is so bad, let's just throw guys in here and see if we can get a spark. You do that with an individual piece, but you don't take 4 or 5 spots of your lineup and just go, oh, well, let's throw all these young guys in here. That's called rebuilding. That's not exactly how you make a stretch run. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I'm not saying you put them all in at the same time. I think you bring them up and you can start playing lefty-righty pinch hitting situations with some of them. The individual I was really talking about was Lindor, as far as what you were saying, is you don't bring Lindor up and then let him rot on the bench. I think you could make sure that he gets in there enough to be a starter, where you guys like, Aguilar, you can have him be a pinch hitter, maybe he can give you a spark like once in the lineup.
I'll tell you what, I thought it was interesting, too. I noticed, was it Sunday's paper? Over the weekend, I think the Plain Dealer had mentioned some of the stuff we're talking about, and they weren't 100% on Lindor either, whether he gets called up. And something that you and I didn't even mention, and this is the financial realities of small market baseball, is it also worth it to the Indians? Like, we're talking about making sure that you can get him in enough games, but is it worth it to the Indians to start the major league clock? Because that hasn't started with Lindor yet. Do you want – and you know what? We're talking 30 days or something here. You know what I mean? But you begin the accrual of that service time, and that all starts to matter later when you get into the money, when you get into the actual career and all of that. So that's another question, the financial aspect of it too. But I don't believe it's as cut and dry that Lindor comes up when everybody does. And I don't have the run with who's going into what playoffs right now in the minor leagues, but remember that too. I saw Bruce in the chat room mentioning about Aguilar. Teams that are going to be in the playoffs, their runs are going to be deeper as well too, which changes them because you don't want to call. I've always thought that was funny though, because it doesn't matter. Minor league playoffs are there for the fans of that team, but to the major league team, they don't care if they're calling up the ace pitcher. They don't care if they're calling up the big bopper. You're here to get ready for the major league team. So at the end of the day, I don't expect the playoffs to factor into the minor league playoffs to factor into the Indians' decisions. If they want Aguilar, well, sorry, but they're going to call Aguilar up. I think. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think if the Indians were out of contention, then you do want to keep those guys down there to get that playoff experience, to be in a playoff-type situation. But if your major league team is in a playoff situation, then it's time to go ahead and, gut the minor league team and just get whoever you can up here that can help.
And I'm with you there, So let's talk about it now. The stage is kind of set here. And, man, you heard, the last – I don't know if – or maybe you didn't hear, but before I brought you on, I was talking about the last time the Indians had a run like this, and you had to go way back in the Wayback Machine. You had to go all the way back to 1968. Indians played 38 days in a row, and they squeezed 41 games in there. Double headers every Sunday from May 21st to June 27th in that stretch. But now the Indians find themselves with another one because of that rain out earlier. They actually had to break the collective bargaining agreement to make this happen. Both sides had to agree to it because in the CBA, no team is allowed to have more than 20 days in a row without a day off. But there was no other place to put that game, and the Angels are kind of stuck too. They've got to come here for one game in the middle. They're not even really close to Cleveland. They're going through, I think it's the Twins, Houston, and the Rangers or something like that. So they're not really all that close to Cleveland, and they have to come here for one game too. But it ends up with this stretch here, and it starts right where you want it, in the division and Chicago. And that's a tough one because Chicago has always been tough for the Indians. They've always put it on them,
That's right, but the one good thing is that we don't have to go up against their ace Chris Sale this week, so his name didn't come up. Although the guy that's going tonight, Jose Quintana, I know he doesn't look that great, that he's 6-10, but he's got a 3.25 ERA, which is much better than the two guys we'll be facing the next 2 days. So I think tonight's game is the big one. If the Indians can get through tonight's game with House going up against Quintana, then I think we're in real good shape for the rest of the series.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you got to take the record out of the way. Like you said, Quintana's 6-10, but with that 3.2 ERA, I mean, clearly better than the record. And obviously, by looking at the White Sox record, you can see that, you know, run support an issue when he's out there as well. I mean, that's a guy that you definitely don't look past him. And don't forget, Chicago this season, hey, man, they're going for 9-14 if they win tonight against the Indians. They've won 8 of 13 so far here, man. So the White Sox have, I don't want to say had the number because that's 8-5, but they've definitely played better. They play above themselves when they play against the Indians. And Quintana, 3-0 with basically 3 flat, 3.07 ERA in his 7 career starts against the Indians. And this year, he's been a part of 2 White Sox victories. He's given up 3 runs over 12 innings in his 2 starts against the Indians here this season. So, he's somebody that the Indians know about. On the Indian side, against him, Mike Aviles, 3 for 5 against Quintana and 14 of 35 against the White Sox. He's been hot against them this year, hitting over 400. And Brantley, personally, 7 of 15 with a home run against Quintana. He's been in a slump, but he's facing a guy that he's been pretty good career-wise against. So it's going to be those 2 guys and the rest of the lineup that's going to have to go to work here against the left-handed Quintana for the Indians to start this series with a victory, like you said. And I think that would be good. Go out there. TJ House, he has not allowed more than 3 earned runs in his last 8 starts in the month of August, a 1.6 ERA for him. So he's got to go out there and silence the bats of the White Sox, and then the Indians have to go out there and get to Quintana. I agree with you. You've got to start this thing. Really, all of these series, you got to start them with victories because that puts you in that driver's seat to make sure that you can get 2 out of 3. You never want to, that's what they have to do. You don't want to drop the first one and have to take the last 2. You want to take that first one and lighten up the pressure for the second half of the series,
That's right. And if you look at the rest of the other 2 pitchers, you got Hector Noce and John Danks. They're both up around 5, and we always seem to crush Danks. So I'm glad to see him come up there. But you talked about Brantley and how he does well against Quintana, and I think Terry Francona did a good job of giving him an extra day off, so he could get 2 whole days off, so he can kind of get out of this slump and then come back and be ready to mash against the White Sox. And I think you talked about how good the White Sox are doing against the Indians. I think you also talked about, teams being focused and stuff. And last year, of course, the Indians just crushed the White Sox. And I think that they came into this season saying, we've got to do better against the Indians. And that's just how the Indians have been about last year, saying we have to do better against the Tigers. And we performed a lot better against the Tigers. And the White Sox do the same against us. So despite, the way that things look pretty good on paper, the White Sox are still a really dangerous team when it comes to playing against Cleveland.
Absolutely. You've got your next 4 series. It bookends with the White Sox. You've got 3 away with Chicago, 3 away with Kansas City. Then you come home for a big one. 4 against Detroit at home, and 4 more. Well, 3 against the White Sox. The Angels one slipped in, and then Minnesota. That huge homestand there to start the month of September. But, looking at the records, like you said, Indians 5-8 this season against the White Sox heading into tonight's game, but 7-6 against Kansas City, and as you mentioned, 7-5 against Detroit. So they definitely improved, but both of those, hey, kind of like the season, about 500 there. But the White Sox, the one that comes first and last here, you have 6 big games with them sandwiched around the 7 with Detroit. And really, it's all division all the way through except for the Angels and except for Houston, Europe, and Tampa Bay at the end. You're playing your division the rest of the way, which is definitely the way you want it. As I said, your destiny is in your hands here. And the Indians, like you said, you get it tonight, then you got Kluber going tomorrow with an opportunity to take the first 2 games and all the pressure's off for that 3rd game of the series with Carrasco. Then you set your sights for Kansas City. So I think tonight, like you said, really big, take the first one. They have to be aggressive here. You can't do a lot of, I know you don't want to be too tight. You don't want to make yourself too tight, but there's not a whole lot of there's always tomorrow because you are quickly running out of real estate on tomorrow.
That's right. And the hopefully just the way this Indians team is set up this year, it doesn't look like they're going to go on a huge, massive stretch like they did last year. If they're going to do it, it's going to have to be winning 2 out of 3. They're not going to win 6 in a row, but if they can keep winning 2 out of 3 like they've done the last 3 series, then they can slowly rise up. We talked about before their record was 60-60. Now it's 66-63. That looks a little bit better. If they can just keep that slow momentum going, hopefully some of these other teams will come back to earth, and hopefully the Indians will be the teams that can physically bring them back down to earth like the Royals and the Tigers.
But that's the water